for you today, in which, yeah, we're doing monthly challenges now. So yesterday, Mr. Pan approached me with a bit of a thing, asking if I wanted to sort of set up a monthly challenge run kind of thing for the Ogre Battle series, or, well, any Matsuno game for that matter. And, so yeah, you know, sure enough, we're going ahead and doing that. Figure I've got a whole friggin' catalog of stuff that I pretty much test every day, so why not? So alright, so this month's challenge is relatively simple. I figure a lot of people, especially over on the Matsuno side here, probably have access to LUCT over on the PSP. So, you know, that's what we're going with this time. Like I said, the challenge is simple. Get through the entire thing without spending any money, like any money whatsoever. And the goal actually isn't to beat the game, it's only to beat Branton Morn. So basically we're skipping Hanging Gardens to make it a little bit faster. And just to make it a little bit simpler, as much as I went through and tested it various different ways, going through the Hanging Gardens with this particular challenge just wasn't terribly fun. So the main goal of this thing is actually, well, to pretty much kind of MacGyver your way through, and actually for whoever wins this challenge, we're going to be handing out a title. So every month we're going to be you know, giving a title to the winner. So it would be the Tactical MacGyver for this one. To give you an idea of how this all works, like I said, we're not doing the One Vision mod for this one because this is one that works a lot better for the vanilla version of the game. Namely, all of your stuff is going to be very limited. So, for example, as you're going through, like, this is right at the start of Chapter 3, you know, if we're looking at weapon-wise, only gotten a few fist weapons, only gotten a few knives, you know, a few swords. Overall, it's not exactly super impressive as far as equipment goes. As far as bows go, I mean, in total we've gotten 2 longbows and 4 great bows, and this is with some grinding. So this run does allow for some grinding, if you want to go ahead and do that. However, the goal of the run is to get through all the way to the very end without, well, in as few days as possible. So that's kind of the race here. So once you get to the very end, you would just take a screenshot, essentially just showing whether or not you used Chariot, and whether, and you know, how long it took you to get to the very end there. As far as, it also conveniently has a little thing on there that says whether or not you spent money on the run. Now you might be thinking, okay, I'll just go craft everything. That's another interesting thing. Up to this point, we've gotten all the crafting books that we can reasonably get, and there are a few considerations on this. So first of all, for Medicine 1 and 2, you'll be collecting all kinds of trash items throughout the game, which you'll be able to change into your consumables. So you've got a sort of Last of Us type of thing going on with this. For Ways of the Gergis, you're probably going to wind up with at least a couple blowguns in your inventory. I haven't gotten any on this one. Yeah, thrown weapons are just going to be a complete no-go. But anyway, as far as your crafting goes, yeah, it's mostly just going to be for medicinal purposes. Overall, your items are going to be very limited. So like right here, I only had 4 items still left for the boss fight against Vice. And the interesting thing is, you can actually do a lot more than you may potentially think for this version. Like, when I was testing the two versions side to side to see which would be, I guess, more interesting for this particular challenge, for OV, generally speaking, once you got heavy weapons, you could just kind of play through like normally. For this one, you had to go a lot more for building towards very specific things. So, like, right here, Mr. Pantaloons here, with his Order of Budgeteers, was having a bunch of issues when it came to Vice. Both Vice and Zabos were 2 that I was kind of concerned would potentially break this run. But in testing, you know, right here, he doesn't even have any skills on this thing. This is on neutral right now. He just came off this fight. It took him a few hits with hammers, basically just going and repeatedly just, you know, getting hard hits over and over. Just basically stacking his entire thing here for strength and vitality. So, for example, we're getting, we got a vitality ring earlier, so getting 5 off this, getting 2 off the leggings, getting 1 off the gaunts, getting nothing off the Aspis, or Aspi, or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of funny because, yeah, it's unclear whether this actually is supposed to be an Aspi. Whatever, ignore that. Getting too much into historical crap. Anyway. So yeah, I was just basically stacking him for strength and vitality, going specifically for defense, while hopefully having just enough to get through his damage threshold. So in many ways, yes, you are going to try and abuse the game's mechanics to try to get through in a way that you're not supposed to be able to, but it's fun. It's very possible. As far as drops you get, you're guaranteed to get at least 1 hammer along the way, you're guaranteed to get a few other things. But the nice part is that it gives you an opportunity to potentially try out some stuff that you wouldn't normally try out. So for example, fist weapons, generally in base game, they're a little bit on the iffy side. I found them to be a lot more useful during this run. Knives are generally pretty OP, but I haven't run into very many cases where I actually want to go ahead and use them. For swords, you end up using them a lot more, just, well, as actual swords rather than kind of insta-kill things. Generally, I found them to be a pretty solid option overall. I actually found myself using two-handers, not even just two-handers, but this broadsword here. So I was using this thing up until Chapter 3. On a normal run, you'd never do that. It's just unthinkable. But yeah, sure enough, I still have a Dragoon using this unfortunate thing right here. Got one Dragoon with a Bulge, got another guy here with his broadsword. Like, you find ways to make that work. And you find some stuff, again, that you just typically wouldn't think would work. So, for example, right here, getting a good strength bonus off the broadsword. So, automatically, it's better than maybe some of its later counterparts when I went back and compared. But yeah, sure enough, if you just stick to leathers, you get your extra 3 dex, you get your extra 2 strength off the gaunts. It's surprisingly enough to, like, just put him over the point where he can still do okay damage. It's not amazing, and you certainly can't go fighting any bosses like that or go fighting any dragons, but that is why I have him as a Dragoon. Like, he can still potentially do some pretty okay stuff. And hello there, Mr. Proco. Thank you for the nice festive little treat. Yeah, we're actually just doing a very quick Q&A here for a monthly challenge that we're doing. But yeah, so as far as money goes, bear in mind, if somebody dies with whatever skills they happen to have, there's no silver transfer because you have to spend a silver to make that happen. So there's no money expenditure whatsoever for the purposes of this run. That means you cannot get any of the basic crafting books. You can only get Medicine 1, 2, and Gerges. As far as little tips that would potentially be useful, if somebody wants to, they can potentially get some of the better equipment if they go for the books and Farampa. Bear in mind, again, we're trying to go for a low day count for this one. One thing I forgot to mention earlier. If you get through the challenge without using Chariot, you can take 2 days off of your day count. So, or it'll just automatically be taken off for the purposes of this run. I know it's not a lot. It's basically just one back and forth, but I figure if it's down to the point where 2 people get the exact same day count, and, you know, one beat it without Chariot and one used it, then, you know, that'll be that. So, oh, by the way, Mr. Procow, if you're interested in participating in this one, you actually have this game on that chip I sent you. So, anywho. See, not sure if it's a meme or not, as these trees are Christmas specific, so their general term holiday doesn't apply here. Well, I mean, they're just nice and festive and look good anytime. Anyway, this also means you can't go and recruit units at the store if anyone dies. This means you'll be seeing a lot more use out of monster units. Also, because rings are pretty rare, you'll probably end up using a lot more monsters they maybe wouldn't normally go for. Like, for example, the Cyclops I found incredibly useful. So he's been a pretty good thing throughout this entire run so far. Without a ring to boost them, I've actually not been having a whole lot of luck with this Cockatrice, but, you know, it is what it is. If you want somebody a little bit tougher, you've always got your lizards. I mean, you've got your recruit skills. That's another thing. Because they're a little bit more expensive, it's a little bit more risky to use the recruit skills. I probably should have put a no retreat rule, but the way I figure it is, if somebody decides to retreat in the middle of a fight, then they're essentially robbing themselves of that day where they're having that fight. So you're still adding more stuff to the day counter there. One thing I will say, I know technically speaking, it's a bit of a tempting thing to say, okay, I don't want to roll fights forever. You know, I went over to Tynemouth, and, it took me six days to get into a fight. I would greatly urge everyone to just say, just roll with the punches, just keep doing it as you're going. Don't reload if a character dies or whatever else. It's just more fun that way. Again, I can't technically stop anyone from doing that or verify if they did or not, but I just want to urge you guys, if you're participating, it's in the spirit of the run to just kind of go with a play it as it lays kind of rule set. Another thing I should probably mention, if you're used to doing any kind of speedruns or challenge runs at this game, you're probably familiar with the usual ban on archers. That's perfectly fine for this one. They actually, with the way that this run is set up, there's no reasonable way to make them overpowered. You can get them over-leveled, but even then, they're going to have inferior equipment. They're going to have a hard time getting through a lot of different armors. Just in general, you're not going to have a good time if you try to overlevel your archers, but again, it's entirely up to you. Figure out a strategy that works and go for it. Let's see, is there anything else? If I were to say one thing, always bear in mind that hammers, especially like Morningstar here, are going to be very good. Generally speaking, if I were to explain stats real quick, if you're ever having an issue trying to get past armor specifically, it's more the attack stat here than the actual like strength or dex bonuses that count for that sort of thing. If you are, so yeah, if you're trying to get past armor, it'll be that. If you can already do more than 1 or 2 damage, then that means that you are able to, at least somewhat get past their defenses. Then all of your strength and dex and things like that will count a little bit more. I don't know all of the specifics. If we, hang on, let's see. If we put the link right here. It's not exact, but there we go. That link there, nishgames.com. While the guide is for the One Vision version, I will say that the damage calculator's in there that Rakes kindly provided, so you can use that for this as well. Since, again, the same mechanics apply. It's still the same game, it's just a different rebalance of the same thing. Alright, so what else? I think that covers most things. I mean, you'll find yourself generally, wanting to keep your clerics alive a hell of a lot more. You may also notice one more thing here, that there's some skills that are generally viewed as useless, or, why would you ever use it? You may find yourself using cudgels a lot more, because you need to keep your casters alive a lot longer, because, again, if something happens to them, your randos that you'll find laying around, they usually won't have a very wide selection of abilities for you to get. They can use them, but they'll only come with 4 once you once you actually recruit them. So in this case, for example, if you recruit a healer, they might have a whole bunch of different fine stuff learned. In her case, she actually doesn't have very much at all, but they will be at kind of a deficit for skills if you decide to just recruit a random unit there. So, you actually might consider doing things like training cudgels. It's like 5 to 10%, depending on the situation, extra dodge and strength per rank. It's the dodge that matters in this case, so might help them survive a little bit longer. Is there anything else? I was hoping for this to be a little bit of a Q&A type thing, but I'm not sure if there's any cues flying around. Let's see, as far as previous questions that have come in here, well, there really haven't been that many. There seem to be a few people that were just kind of going gung-ho for it. But yeah, this is just like a general idea on what to expect. Just try to have fun with it, experiment with it. There's going to be all kinds of weird stuff that comes up. And, you just kind of work around it. That's how it goes with this. So there we go. We got neutral route on this one. If you want a little bit of a hint as far as what the different routes provide, if you haven't played it in a while, if you aren't too familiar with the routes or any of that, it starts off with neutral, or not neutral. It starts off with chaos and law. That's the first decision that you get at the very start of the game. If you go for chaos, generally speaking, you're gonna have a few more difficult fights right off the bat. But potentially you can end up recruiting some of the stronger characters pretty much immediately, especially when it comes to Aircel. She's one of the few characters that actually can be a really overpowered character in almost any circumstance. Always try to keep Canopus alive. Do everything you can to make that happen. He's probably your strongest everyman type character. Personally, I would say keep him in his Barton class. You generally want to make use of some of the higher stats that one gets. Not to mention later on you can turn him into an archer and then he'll have those extra points under his belt. For anyone kind of hopping into this that isn't familiar with the background stat mechanic, basically anytime that you train somebody as a particular class, they will be getting a tiny amount of stats in the background. So for example, they level up and they get like 0.1 to 0.3 in every one of their stats. So the ones that they're good at, like for example with Dick and Cleric, they'll be really good at Mind, which is a mix of magical resistance and magical attack, even though their actual magical attack doesn't matter whatsoever. It's weird. Clerics are just so weird in vanilla. It's like, let's stack them towards that one dump stat, and whatever. It's not really a dump stat. Anyhow, I'm getting off track. So okay. It's okay. Aircel is great, just killed her in the long run. Aw. Well, that's gonna be a lot more difficult. So yeah, by the way, Evan, do you have any questions for this run that you'd like to see answered? Any rando questions, you know, random things you're wondering about, all that kind of business? But as you can see, we're already in Chapter 3. He's still running a broadsword build. It's still viable. You can make really crappy stuff viable for way longer than it should be. It's just a matter of figuring out what stats do what, and the game does a really bad job of telling you what those are, so, you know. Like, the funny part is, at this point in the game, the reason that I wanted to do this little Q&A on this fight in particular, it's just to show you that this is supposed to be a joke fight. These characters are all essentially captives. This is, for all intents and purposes, an execution here, and they're given level 1 equipment in order to show, like, oh yeah, you know, they're giving them a chance, but it's not a real chance. But yeah, sure enough, you know, here they are. You know, and still doing a pretty okay job, and we're still using the same equipment as them in some cases. So yeah, it's definitely possible. Like, this run is possible. I've tested it multiple times now. It's fun to see the kinds of weird crap that you come up with. Because, for example, in one run, I remember I kept getting a bunch of upgraded two-handers over and over and over, and I just kept figuring out ways to stack them towards that. I should point out one little misconception about this is that some of the weapons don't scale like people think they scale. Like, for example, if you have a dex weapon, it's still going to be like, you know, mostly towards dex on one hand and then somewhat on strength on the other. It's still going to use both stats. So, for example, a spear, like many people assume from playing Dark Souls or something like that, it's largely going to be dex-based instead it's strength-based. So you still stack strength. Like, generally speaking, if you don't know, stack strength because it gives you defense too. But if you know something for sure, for example, a bow will be dex, like a dagger will be mostly dex. Strength is still not useless because it's still extra attack power on top of it, and it's still a little bit extra defense. So not really. I was going to do the no money run after the Iron Man. Still interested to see how it rolls out. Yep. So I should probably also point out it's going to be we have 1 month to do this challenge, and we're going to do something new every month. So there will be a title awarded to whoever has the lowest day counts for their completed challenge by the end of it. As far as the advanced crafting books, I was briefly touching on that earlier. You can't technically go through Farapa and get all those books, but you're going to increase your day count dramatically. And it also should be noted that a lot of those things can't be used up until like your late 20s, 30s kind of situation. So we're not, generally speaking, you're not going to be getting a whole lot of use out of those. But I'm sure somebody will find some creative way to use it. Somebody always does. But that's the fun part of this. I want to see how people do. This is the first one. I'm sure there will be some weird stuff that comes up. I'm sure there will be some stuff that I never considered. But that's how it goes, you know. We'll see how it goes. We'll adapt, and we'll move on forward. So, wow. Broadsword guy's getting real unlucky over here. So, let's see. Other advice I want to throw out there. Don't be worried about multi-classing your characters. Like, they will have a lot of skills that they don't end up using once everything's all said and done. So, for example, you know, like, say you train them as a Dragoon, they've got all their Dragon Slayer skills, but they don't end up using them very much. You know, like, for example, if you wanted some character to be really, really good with, let's say two-handers here, because that's one of those ones that doesn't get a lot of love. So they'd start off as a warrior in the first chapter, just because pretty much everybody does. I'd advise saving some of those levels in warrior. Again, you're always getting background stats for those classes. Some of them, like if you want to use Lizardmen, try to switch off of warriors as soon as you can, so that later on in the game you can go back, you can get a few levels in warrior for everybody. So everybody that is that class at the time that it levels up will get those base stat gains. So it's an interesting system, even if it doesn't realistically make the slightest bit of sense whatsoever, but whatever. It's, you know, it's fun to mess with. But, anywho, you know, even if it's about as intuitive as putting on a shoe with your teeth, but whatever. That's besides the point. So yeah, always bear in mind that every piece of equipment potentially has some benefit that you're not, potentially looking at. Like I said, like right here with this broadsword here, it may have a much lower armor penetration rating than the 3 swords ahead of it, but it does come with a lot of strength bonus on top of it, so it's still potentially worth using for a good long while. Is he dead? No, he's got 2 health left. Whatever, that's fine. Another thing, always remember to try and any kind of ranked skills. it's still worth keeping them around even if you aren't necessarily using them. So, for example, like, or even if you don't plan on training them up very much, because one way or another, you're probably not going to be maxing out your skill trees with as short of a run, but at the same time, finally it gets that kill. So yeah, you're not going to be maxing out any ranks, but even at rank 1, it's still giving you about a 5% damage plus evasion rating. So that's always handy. Always make sure to go pick up these cards. It's basically like a free level up in that particular stat. It's not going to be super amazing unless you stack a whole bunch of them, but still, it's handy to have. If you find yourself short on healing items, try to be pretty sparing with your healing items. But if you find yourself short on them, always remember that you can go craft them off of the junk items you're picking up. It's not necessarily going to be super amazing, but you'll still be able to get some neat stuff out of it. Like you may find yourself actually making use of those 2 books that nobody ever looked at. I was going to say, you almost got killed off by that random axe lady. In many ways, while playing through this, it kind of made me wonder why there's no title for playing through the game this way. Just because it does feel very appropriate, I'd say. It does feel like the game, wanted somebody to play through it like this. So, either way. So he's just going to get killed through his phalanx there. Oh, and he might actually make use of phalanx, There might be a non-joke use for that ability during this run. So we got a few little things during that fight, but nothing too special. But that's the deal here. You're trying to collect whatever you can, try to collect whatever levels you can, whatever stats you can. Just it's definitely worth sticking to your starting generic team there. I kind of expanded this team far more than I would recommend doing. Like, I definitely recommend sticking to, like, maybe 16 units. I just like scattering them around in case I wanted backups. Like, realistically, I've used Volkert sometimes, I've used Bayan sometimes, but usually it's, like, the monsters and then these guys up here. But what else did I want to cover here? So yeah, your class changes are limited, so just kind of shuffle people around while still kind of preparing ahead for what classes you want to use later. So for example, if you wanted, like, one thing I'd recommend if you wanted some pretty good overall coverage for later in the game. So you start off as a warrior there, you go into archers, you start training them towards crossbows. From there, you say, you make them into a knight, maybe you go one-handed crossbows for a while, maybe you go for some kind of melee options. Don't worry too much about getting finishing moves. As long as you have one finishing move of some kind on everybody by the end of the game, you're pretty much good. They aren't as necessary. Again, we're not doing Hanging Gardens, so there's no need to worry about beating Dorgi by the end of it, so you can get through without using finishing moves. In many cases, you may well not even get a rank 2 on most of your characters by the end of it. But for example, one thing I can show earlier here, so I'm not even going to bother saving that one, but one thing that I wanted to show earlier here is right before this fight. Even if you're completely overwhelmed, even if you're having issues, there's two things to consider. Like, let's say you moved over here and you're like, okay, let me randomly try to subdue this statue, or try to subdue Vice. There we go, that's a good plan, it'll totally work out. So you made a bad move, right? You made a bad move, but you're going for the no chariot thing. Oh, it's time to restart. No. Here's the thing, it doesn't count. If you reset your turn, it does not count for the chariot counter, just so you know. So basically, chariot is only like if you hit L, and then you're like, okay, let me go restart from this move up here. If you go for that, sure, that's going to be a little bit sucky. If instead, you just hit L, go back to your current turn, you're just right there. You didn't reset. It's still your same turn. It didn't lock a new piece of data into that line there. So that'll be very useful for at least a few folks, I'm sure. Another thing, if you happen to get yourself stuck on this Vice fight, all you need to know is you just need to knock him down to a quarter of his health. It's like right here, survived with 2 health. He would have easily won this fight. Doesn't even matter. Automatically ends here. So either way, I think that briefly covers what I wanted to cover on this. Bear in mind, again, you have a month to do this one, so it's up until 6/14. As far as the version, again, it's just base game LUCT. I guess I should probably say the US version, or just basically the Western release, because the Japanese version would be quite a bit different. And yeah, again, I would highly encourage everyone just to do a kind of like play it as it lays type of rule set for this. Just again, it's just in the spirit of the run. You know, even if you don't win, the idea is just to have fun here. We'll see how many people actually decide to participate, because right now there's no hard numbers on that. I think we're 4 or 5 since yesterday, something like that. Either way. So, you know, let me know if you feel like participating. Everyone's free to go here as long as you're able to help, you know, send a screenshot of your PSP or your Vita or your emulator or whatever else over to the Discord. You know, it's all good. If you don't know where to find the Discord, I will put a link when I put this as a video. Actually, for anyone that happens to be sitting here at the moment, let's go ahead and do that. So we're over at the Matsuno Games section, which I'd assume everyone seeing this probably would have come from the Matsuno Games section in the first place. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll be around just about any time to answer them. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So you guys have a good one. I will look forward to seeing what kinds of stuff people come up with. And yeah, have fun.